now rocking with TDF everything. Spoiled rotten.
Spoiler alert.
Welcome and welcome back, everybody.
Hey.
It's me, Daniel,
And this is Ben.
on Spoiled Rotten, and we are going to be spoiling Batman Cape Crusader, just Batman Cape Crusader. I got it right.
It is just Cape Crusader, right?
Yeah.
I'm not.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm okay.
So
I'm not crazy.
I'm going to try something different here and read the IMDb, I don't know what you would call it, like summary of this show, and we'll see how closely you think that actually fits with this show.
Right.
After a family tragedy, affluent philanthropist Bruce Wayne transforms into the Batman, where his crusade for justice spawns unforeseen ramifications. Now, I feel like I'll let you speak.
Do I think that description matches up with the show?
Yeah.
A little bit of no, a little bit of
I
yes.
think a lot of no.
Yeah.
I think this show isn't necessarily interested in Batman the way this summary would have you believe.
That's correct.
I don't like. This seems like it was written just like, I don't know. This is what Batman is usually about. It's not what the show is about, though. Like, it sounds like I'm trying to be negative right away. I think this show is what that old Fox show Gotham probably wanted to be.
Yes.
Because it's just about people in Gotham, not necessarily Batman. He's kind of just like oh, hey, Batman's here too. That's great.
Yeah.
I would say that there's like the surprise season-long arc of Harvey Dent, but it feels like it really is just the people who deal with the law in Gotham, mostly Barbara Gordon, but Montoya, like Renee Montoya, gets a lot of play in this as well. She kind of disappears near the back end of it, but she's pretty big. Like, those two are pretty big in here, and I feel like those three characters, Harvey Dent, Renee Montoya, and Barbara Gordon, are the people that you learn about, and I felt invested in. Like, it felt like the writers were invested in them, and I was invested in them because of it. Everyone else is kind of like, yeah, they're here too.
I agree. You know that funny thing that people say when there's like, oh, it's Sex and the City really has 5 characters. The city is the 5th one. I'm like, that's how it feels. Like, they really established Gotham and the corruption of Gotham as a character itself. And I really appreciate that. I really, really do. Because I think one of the biggest things with Batman properties in the past that I've seen is just we're told about the corruption of Gotham, but we're never actively seeing how corrupt it actually is. And in this, you're just like, with everything you see with Flash and Bullock and all that kind of stuff, I'm like, oh, that's damn corrupt. For sure, this is damn corrupt. Yeah. This is great. I love it.
I think I would say it always deals with the corruption like that. As I said, that's the whole point of the Nolan trilogy is Bruce Wayne being like, I can't let cops and lawyers deal with this because they're too corrupt. Yes. I think it always deals with that, but what makes this different, and I think makes it feel more palpable, is it leans more anti-cop than not. Like, I feel, I think that's the smart thing of making Barbara Gordon a defense lawyer. Because she's obviously she's not, but she's on the opposite side of her father in this, who's still there. Jim Gordon is still the commissioner in this, but making Barbara Gordon not just like a librarian like sometimes, or just someone who's inspired by Bruce Wayne and her own like lawyer with somewhat opposing views to her father, makes it more clear that this show isn't like, oh, it's just a couple of bad apples. Like, it's very clear that it's like, look at how effective Montoya is. Not effective, because she's trying to be a good cop, and so's Jim, in a world where like these idiots, Flash and Bullock, can run circles around you because of corruption. Yes. And because that's generally how police work. Yeah, like, I think it also is like the right time in our zeitgeist for this show to be like, for people to be like, have more open conversations about police. But it's like, yeah, this feels better because you have Barbara Gordon actively being like, hey, you can't just be like, oh, he's bad so he deserves jail. Like
Mhm.
you're ignoring all the societal ills that have led to someone making decisions like this.
Mhm.
um but yeah, I would like to try and go through it episode by episode, but I those were my initial thoughts. Was it's not really a Batman show. Like I've seen other people commenting on it too, and I'm like, yeah, like you don't know what his stance is on guns in this. You don't know like how he really feels about anything,
Mhm.
because the whole thing is, yeah, he's putting up a front,
Mhm.
and he's really an asshole to Alfred, which I hate. I know that
I really hate
I
that
know they
too.
get there
Yeah.
eventually, but I'm like, no, fuck you, man. Like
Yeah.
you're too old for this to be like just the first time you're being nice to Alfred.
I agree. I feel like there's this it's writing this really really interesting curve of like, okay, they are establishing everything here. There's a backdrop. You can see where they're going with the show and all that kind of stuff. And part of that is Bruce dealing with Alfred, or Pennyworth, as he keeps calling him
I fucking
throughout the
hate
whole
it.
season. And I hate that so much. I'm so glad we're on the same page with that. He's like, every time he's like on the bat comms, he's like, Pennyworth. I'm like, what are you doing,
And
man?
to his
Like,
face.
to his
Also,
face.
this makes it like uh Matt Reeves' second go at Batman, where he makes
Yeah.
Batman be an asshole to Alfred. I'm like, God, what's your problem?
What is your problem? Yeah, I don't like that aspect of it. I really, really don't. I like the iteration of Batman where he recognizes how important Alfred is to him, and he finally gets there. But we're gonna go episode by episode and all
Yeah.
that. So, which we're gonna talk about that commentary. But throughout the whole thing, it gives a lot of different properties of Batman kind of like blended up and then
Hmm.
presented in a way that's very, very interesting. Like you said, it's a lot of it's Gotham. A lot of this is year one. A lot of this is like all that kind of stuff of like getting the people established and really putting that corruption at the forefront, right? In yeah, you're right. Nolan does a great job of here's the corruption of Gotham, all that kind of stuff. But here, I think it's because we have more time, we have more arcs, we have like more of a slow burn that I'm like, oh yeah, they're really doing a good job with this. And you have like for me, I'm like, yeah, okay, they're going in a different direction with a lot of this kind of stuff. One thing I really liked is that they didn't do the parent thing over again. I'm like, good, we don't have to see the parents die. It's just we know it's happening. We're just gonna go, right. It's great in
I
that sense.
I just I don't know. I understand people like to make that as a joke, but I don't know why people are afraid of, if that's like we've said it multiple times. That is what's driving him. So why would we
Yes.
shy away from showing that? It would be just telling, not showing. Like
Yeah.
you would need to dig into how he feels about that, which means you'd probably have to show it.
Yeah.
I would say, yeah, this is not my favorite exploration of Batman, but it's a good show. But I
Yeah.
do think things like that, where they're like, yeah, you get it, his parents died. I'm like, okay, well, you're not giving me much of anything else, so I don't know.
Yeah. Because it's like, yeah, it's a new enough Batman, but it's also not in the
No,
sense where
because
I'm
he's like
like,
year 2 or 3 in this,
yeah, yeah. And I'm like, okay, great.
which is also why it pisses me off the way he treats Alfred. But whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. But yeah, let's go episode to episode.
So yeah, first one is in Treacherous Waters. This is the Oswalda Cobblepot episode.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I think I obviously don't care who, like, how you portray Penguin. I think
Mm-hmm.
what's important about Penguin is that Penguin feels either disrespected by being lumped in with like a Joker or a Mr. Freeze, because
Mm-hmm.
Penguin usually is like, no, I'm a good mobster. I'm not one of these crazy people. But I
Yeah.
think what makes it interesting when you make Oswald Cobblepot Oswaldo and a woman, there's the added layer of, even if you don't think of me as a freak, I'm still a woman trying to do this thing with a bunch of men, and so
Mm-hmm.
there you get a deeper layer of like demanding respect and feeling on the outs. So I appreciated that. I thought that was good.
I completely agree. The recharacterization, the gender swapping of Penguin to me worked fundamentally very, very well because it's the other iterations of Penguin where it's like, how does this person gain popularity when you have another character like Two-Face that's like disfigured and everyone's like, oh my God, it's just like every other version of it. Well, not every other version, but like traditionally the other versions are like, how does this person get favor with like all these other politicians and all that kind of stuff? This version of it makes sense to me. And like you said, the gender thing, I'm like, it actually works better in that favor without having to make Penguin like, like a little person or smaller, disfigured in that sense. It's like, no, it's the gender thing that's the barrier to being playing in this thing. And I completely agree. It's the idea of hey, I'm not killing people, I'm just exploiting people. It's not that bad, you see? And I'm like, oh, this has a good run for its money. It's ruthless Penguin. I like it, and I like how we're introduced to Penguin right off the bat. It's like,
Yeah.
hey, I'm gonna put on a show for you all, and it's hiding in plain sight, like he says. And the idea of the iceberg being a kind of, for lack of a better term, like a cruise ship.
Well, it's
Such
like
a
a
cool
gambling
idea.
ship or whatever.
It's
like
a great idea
those
instead of a nightclub.
boat casino type thing.
Yeah, it's so cool. I love that. So
Yeah,
cool.
I thought that was good, and I liked like her kids. I can't tell if both of them were fucking her over or just one of them, because it just seemed like both of them were kind of like, nah, she needs to be done. Like, she's crazy.
Yeah, one was dumb but innocent. The other one was
That's
definitely
the thing.
guilty.
I don't know if he was innocent. I think it was just like he's just an idiot, and then obviously we know that the one who didn't get killed initially was the one ratting her out, but I don't know that the other one wasn't like going to do something.
Mhm. Plus, I think the gender swap aspect of like, oh, you're a mom killing your kids. It's a different kind of ruthless.
And the fact that she says he was my favorite and I did that to him. So
yeah,
just
it's so good.
consider that.
Yeah,
you're my favorite now, I guess.
It's like, you're my favorite. It's like I'm the only one left.
Yeah.
You read between the lines. I saw that.
And I like that when she sees Batman, because in this show people are like really doubling down on he's not real. So I just like was like, oh shit, that is a real Batman. That doesn't really change how I operate, but okay. I was gonna say she's probably the most successful villain, but that's not true. I just think she's one of 2 or 3 that are actually successful. Even though she goes to jail, she still bombs the police department, which they kind of don't ever deal with again. Like next episode, it's perfectly fine. Which is why when we were talking off mic, I thought none of these episodes were connected, which obviously isn't the case. But I was just like, I mean, she blew up the police station. that would have some ramification.
Yeah, there should be like some backdrop kind of storytelling of like, oh yeah, there's construction
we have to
going
move
on
somewhere,
or,
but it's like, no, it's here again, fully built up again.
Yeah,
but she did what she wanted to do, which I appreciated. That like, Batman does get her arrested, but it is mostly her being like, I still did what I needed to do. I'll be out soon.
Yeah.
And I like the other thing I think makes it more anti-cop is Batman seems to like genuinely want to beat these cops up.
Yes.
I like it. I know people will think that's bad, but I'm like, good.
No.
I've seen online some people be like, no, he's always not like cop. I'm like, that's just not true.
That's not true at
most
all.
stories is him trying to find the good cops. And he's like, oh, Jim's a good cop. I like that in this show. I know we're going episode by episode, but in this show, he's like, yeah, okay, Jim Gordon, I'm dealing with your daughter though. Like, that's the relationship. Is me
because
and Barbara, I'll work with her because she's outside of your stupid worldview.
Because he sees like exactly with what and we'll get to this episode with Floss and Bullock. It's just like, yeah, you're still can't really trust you there, but I can definitely trust this person, right?
Yeah, it's like, sure, you're a good guy, but look who's working for you, and nothing bad can happen to them. So
yeah,
which is my point in real life as well. It doesn't matter if you're a quote unquote good cop. You're in a system that will protect and promote the bad guys. So that means that it's ultimately bad.
Yeah, the idea of like, hey, in the real life examples of like, oh, there are good cops that do like report bad cops, and look what happens to their career, and look how fast they're ousted out of the force and all that kind of stuff, and how much they're bullied and abused and all that kind of stuff. So it's just like, yeah, you could have one good cop amongst all these rats that are going to make their
Yeah,
life incredibly
it's the
ridiculously difficult.
institution that's bad, so it doesn't matter
Yeah,
about the individuals in it in that sense, because
yeah,
what prevails is the corruption. Or I
exactly.
shouldn't even say corruption. It works the way it should work, which is
Mhm.
to police us and protect property and not
Yep.
actually help.
Yeah, it's militarization, and militarization ideology of like, yeah, we stand together no matter what. I'm like, yeah, guess what? You're not at war with civilians.
Yeah.
You're doing a different job, but that's what gets carried over is that idea of like, hey, we're at war here, shoulder to shoulder, no matter what. And I'm like, in a war situation, sure, that makes sense. However, and not even debating like the purpose of the war or anything. I'm like, okay, that makes sense. But you can't have that same mentality in this where you're trying to be like, hey, we're trying to prevent crime, not be a part of crime and, ignore that. But you're right. Like, so much evidence of police force doing that.
Yeah.
Um,
Because as I
that
said, it's not actually meant to prevent crime.
it's just protect property
Yeah.
and punish people. Yeah.
Yes. This episode also introduced Rupert Thorne, who was a character I liked in the original Batman the animated series, and I was glad he was back here. He really sticks it out. Like, he's obviously going to be more important second season based on the last couple of scenes of the season, but in this episode, you're like, oh, Penguin is making a move to be the new Rupert Thorne.
Yep.
And Batman learns with Alfred at the end, like, oh, I took her out off the playing field, but I've created this vacuum that's gonna cause an issue.
I really like that. I really, really do. The idea of like, hey, I screwed up here by, removing the top head. Now there's that void that there's going to be a power grab for, and people are going to go wilder. He's like, what did I? The fact that he's still learning and has those kind of
Mm-hmm.
ideas is actually so cool to me in this because it genuinely does describe the idea of like, you can't beat crime that way in a children's way of like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, we took down the boss, everything's gonna disband. Like, no, people are
Yeah,
gonna.
you have to be a little more tactical. And I
Yeah,
also, yeah, I think it's a good moment, but it's like, why aren't we dealing with that more throughout the season? Like,
yeah,
that should have been a thing where it's like, I understand that you can extrapolate things from his actions. It's just, if you're calling the show Batman twice, Batman Cape Crusader, like, then I'm expecting it to focus on him in a way that lets me see a bit more
mhm,
of his thought process and him working through this,
mhm.
which the show doesn't really want to do, which is fine.
Right.
It gives you brief moments, but I was just kind of like, oh, okay. So I guess we're not going to learn about him any further than what I bring to the show.
Yeah, yeah.
Second episode, to be and be a villain. This one threw me off because the whole time I'm like, hey, they're using Clayface's name, but isn't this Gentleman Ghost or whatever? But I'm like, no, they're just doing Clayface, and I just haven't seen this version of Clayface before.
Mm-hmm.
That's fine. I didn't really care about it, other than it's a lot of Renee Montoya, and I like that character. Is another character I liked from the animated series, and I was like, yeah, okay, I like this. I like watching her try to figure things out.
Yeah. I like the fact that she's given much more to do here than the regular animated series. It is really rounding out all these side characters and all that kind of stuff. Which I understand your critique of like, this is still a Batman show. Why aren't they focusing
No,
more on Batman?
I'm
But
I'm not digging the show for not being what I wanted it to be. I'm saying I appreciate what it actually is. It's
yeah,
just weird packaging.
I agree. I agree. Like, yeah, but it is such a cool iteration of Clayface to me. I'm like, oh, are they doing Clayface right now? And the fact they are, and the fact that he did what he was doing because it was like, I just love that whole through line of like, oh, you'd be a leading man if you didn't look
Mm-hmm.
that way. And even the actress that he falls in love with is like, oh yeah, like you'd be so good if you, and then confirms like, yeah, if I didn't look this way, kind of deal. He goes to that extent, it's like, oh, you're still gonna reject me, full on villain mode now,
Yeah.
baby. And I'm like, this is cool in the sense where, and this is where I was like confused with the show, is like, okay, this is a cool iteration of Clayface because he can manipulate his face and doesn't have like the superpowers that he did in the 90s. and then there's like inconsistencies within the season where it's like, are they leaning into the superpower aspect of some of these rogue villains, or are they not? And
They
some
are.
of them times they are, and then sometimes they're not. They're more grounded, and I like the fact that they gave us a more grounded Clayface. Because to me, I'm
But
like
it's,
the
I
original
mean,
one
it's
was
still a
so.
superpower. You couldn't really do that in real life.
No, I get that, but at least it was just not like, okay, he was gonna be able to melt and throw things and all that kind of stuff. It's just like, okay, he was able to mask himself and play the system by acting using his skill. I'm like, that
Yeah.
was cool. I
Well, I
really,
mean,
really
I
like
would
that.
say that you don't know he can't do that. It's just that's not what he's trying to
True.
do. Like
Right.
his whole thing was, I need to look a certain way, so
Mhm.
that's how you use your powers. I know. I guess I only bring it up because I think the show is actually pretty consistent with what's going
Mhm.
on. It's Batman realizing that he's not just dealing with mobsters.
Right.
He's dealing with people that have abilities or aren't from this plane of existence.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. It's a good episode. I really like this episode. It builds a lot of Gotham and Renee Montoya and all that kind of stuff. Changes Clayface fundamentally, which I'm like, good. I
Well, there
like
are
it.
three clay faces. This is pretty standard
Hmm.
comic. Basil, Carlo.
Hmm.
I mean, I think we're thinking of the animated series one, which wasn't the same guy.
It's definitely what I'm thinking about
Yeah,
because it's hard not to think about this and watch this series at the same time. Um, it's animation styles are very, very similar. It's doing to me like what um X-Men 97 does for the regular X-Men. It's just like it's just expanding off of this in such better
yeah.
writing
I
and
mean,
all
they
that
are
kind of
different
stuff.
shows because, as you
Oh,
pointed out,
absolutely.
like I'm not saying you don't know that. I'm just saying for
Hmm.
anyone listening who hasn't watched, this isn't
Hmm.
like X-Men '97 because this is just a different continuity
Yeah,
versus X-Men '97 was legitimately continuing a continuity.
correct. But in that sense of like we're taking the modern day storytelling kind of tropes and really layering it into this as opposed to what it was limited by in the 90s and all that because they recognize that this is for multiple audiences as opposed to what the X-Men back then or like all those shows back then that were animated. It's like, yeah, we're going for kids. We're going for teenagers and all that. They're really pushing this to be like, no, millennials are gonna want to watch this too. So it's great. I do like the layering, and it's a step up. It's evolved in that sense, which I really like.
Next episode is Kiss of the Catwoman. I like Catwoman, so I appreciated this iteration of
Mhm.
Catwoman. Again, it's like the original version from the comics.
Mhm.
She's just a rich, bored person.
Rich brat.
Yeah,
It's
I
brat
really
brat girl
liked
summer.
her maid getting one over on her at the end of like, no, I've got 3 years back pay owed to me, so you can fuck off.
Yeah.
I'm not bailing you out.
I sold this. I sold this. Screw off. You're good.
Yeah. I
I
I
really
love
like
the
this episode.
glee whenever she had to deal with Batman, where she'd be like, "Oh shit, you got toys," or like, they were very clearly trying to have like sexual innuendo there, where she's like, "Oh, you've got toys," and just how she's happy like when he tries to tend to her wound. She's like, "Yeah, I knew it," or when he's beating up people that were trying to get her, the
Mhm.
cops, and she's just like, "Yeah, I'm into this."
Yeah. Yeah, she's doing some great stuff there. The underlying kind of message with the kink and the whole like toxic relationship thing. It's building up into a really, really good thing. I can't wait to see her again in future episodes. But they do such a good
Yeah,
job with her, I find.
I really did appreciate being like, all right, I hope they don't screw up Catwoman, and then being like, no, I
Hmm.
like this. This is good.
Yep.
This is fun. I like you look forward to seeing her more because I felt like they captured what I think works best about that relationship, which is they're very clearly um attracted to each other, but
Yep.
Catwoman is like, but I'm not going to let you stop me from what I
Hmm.
want to do. Like, you're not really going to win me over to be
Hmm.
a good guy. I still have the desire to steal and do what I need to do.
Yep. Yep. And I like at the beginning like when she like sells her like penthouse or whatever and moves to the slums, she's like they won't find us here. I'm like, oh yeah, that's smart, but at the same time like you're not that smart, you're just finding a clever way to justify the fact that you're not good at managing your money.
Yeah, no,
It's really funny.
she's not like a genius. She's just like I'm having fun until I'm not. Like I mean, I don't think you ever see her
Mhm.
not truly having fun, other
Right.
than when her maid is like, "No, I'm not bailing you out." But like as you said, it's like these in the moment, spur of the moment decision making things where
Mhm.
she's like, "Yeah, this will maximize my fun for now."
Yeah, she's a very reactive character, and I
Yeah,
really, really like that. She's in the moment, and she does such a good job in this episode of doing all those things, but being a little way to like justify her decisions to be like, oh yeah, what do you expect me to do? I gotta adopt all these cats, and I'm like, what?
yeah. The
This is
maid being like, "You brought another one home? What the hell?"
it's so good. The maid, I'm such a big fan of.
Yeah, she's great.
Because I,
Um,
I was genuinely being like, are they doing a very like a mirrored take on the Alfred and Batman kind of situation? And it was like, no, they're not. And they're just the maid is just gonna straight up like, yeah, you owe me 3 years of cash, and I'm
well,
not gonna stand for
they
this
are.
anymore.
It's just they because that
Well,
maid
yeah, true.
isn't invested in Selena the way Alfred is, then she goes, but it also is that is the
Mhm.
way Catwoman would deal with things. Like, yeah,
Yeah,
we're here together, but also if you're gonna stop me from doing what I want to do, then I'm out, which is what
yeah,
ultimately happens to me. So it is a mirror thing. Like she
right.
knows she's Catwoman. It's not like she's hiding it from her. She's in on everything. She's
Mhm.
supporting it. She's just like because her boss is the way she is, then she's like, yeah, and I'll treat you the same.
Yeah, yeah. It's definitely a healthier relationship in that sense versus the Alfred and Batman relationship where I'm like, oh man, you're just
Yeah,
gonna
Alfred
keep
is like,
taking
no, I
this.
just love you, and Batman's like, fuck off, and you're like,
Yeah, he's just
I hate you,
codependent and
Batman.
toxic.
Stop this.
It's true. It's so
uh,
funny.
this also introduces Harleen Quinzel as the therapist. Well, this is the doctor that he has to go see after he hits someone for. I was really like, oh, they're not going to do this, are they? But like, the camera before you hear the guys talking, the camera kind of settles in on these guys looking at Martha Wayne's jewels. I'm like, they're gonna say something fucked up, aren't they? And they do.
Mhm.
It's like, well, why would you wear that in Crime Alley? And I like that Bruce Wayne was like, the show is over. I'm gonna hit you. I'm not pretending. I'm not gonna protect who I am by like hitting you softly. I'm going to give it my all. I hate this.
Mhm.
And
Yep.
I like that Harleen throughout is like, I know you're putting up walls, and I get that,
Mhm.
and it's not cool that you hit him, or like it wasn't just a spur. Like there's something bubbling under here that you're just not gonna let me get into.
Mhm. Yeah, like that she calls him out on all her shit. I like the characterization of how smart she actually is. Because I think one of the biggest things about the previous Harleys is like, yeah, we're told she's smart, but that quickly devolves because of the Joker. But we actually get to see how smart she is in this series with multiple episodes, and I think that's really, really cool.
Also, she doesn't put on the outfit and become zany. Like
Yeah,
she's zany out of the outfit. She's actually very calm, cool, and collected when she's in her Harley Quinn outfit,
yeah.
which I thought was interesting and I liked. But obviously, we're not on that episode. But
Mhm.
I the whole time watching, I was like, I don't understand why people are mad at this iteration. This is really good.
Yeah, the let's get to that
I'm
episode because that'll
yeah.
bring up that point. Yeah.
Well, I'm just saying because she's here now. I'm not talking about when she becomes full on Harley Quinn. I just mean the character is like we talked about off mic.
Mhm.
Like you only ever know about her profession after the fact. Like
Mhm.
we were alive for the beginning of Harley Quinn, so we can speak with a little bit more authority than say like a Clayface. But it's like
Mhm.
that animated show was the beginning of Harley Quinn, so she was just
Yes.
presented as the Joker's sidekick. I don't
Mhm.
even think she had lines in her first episode or first thing. Like obviously she gets lines and becomes this huge character, and then they put her in the comics. But it's like you that's like an afterthought where you're like, oh right, she was a professional and he twisted her around.
Right.
But like this show is like, no, she's her own person,
Yep.
and she like she came to the villainy uh before Joker,
Mhm.
which I think is good. And if you say you're a fan of the character, why wouldn't you want this iteration?
Mhm. I also like this iteration of like her being a vigilante in her own right. Be like, hey, I'm dealing with all these billionaire greedy assholes,
Mm-hmm.
and if I'm gonna do my thing instead of just killing them, I'm gonna make them donate all their funds and all that kind of stuff. I'm like, it's got a cool spin on the vigilantism kind of thing that I really, really appreciate too. It's like that is her driving factor. That's great. It's the idea of like, you're so dumb, you're so rich, you're so entitled, but I'm so well educated that I'm gonna one up you. I'm gonna do this. It makes everything about it clicks to me. And I'm
Yeah,
like, this
it's
is
great.
really, really good. And the whole theme of like, yeah, like, and we'll talk more about this, but just the idea that they changed so much of her character and really write those aspects, I really, really enjoy it.
Yeah,
I
it's
really
great.
enjoy it.
So the next is Night of the Hunters, which is, you've seen Flass and Bullock mostly throughout these first 3 episodes, but this is the episode where like, now, like, well, let's show you how fucked these guys really are, because the mayor is like, we need a task force to get rid of the Batman, and Montoya gets to lead it, and I do feel bad for her, but it is kind of like, well, you are a cop, so it makes sense. Where she's like, this is how we'll get Batman, and they just pretend to be doing muggings and stuff, and Batman just watches and is like, no, I'm not engaging. I know what
I
this
smell
is.
a trap when I see one.
Until Harleen comes in, again, not as Harley Quinn, but Dr. Quinzel comes in because she's friends with Barbara, and is like, hey, you guys are thinking too small. Like, you look, he's dressed as a bat. Like, that's fucked. You should be thinking bigger and like matching that. Like, he's gonna go after the freak. I keep saying freaks. It's not a good thing to say, but like,
right,
he's gonna go after the costumed people.
Yeah,
He's not gonna deal with this. And so then Flass and Bullock, who I was a bit bummed. I was like, wow, they just made Bullock a bad guy in this. Like, usually he can be, you're like, oh, he could be fixed, but this, they're like, nah, he's
just straight up corrupt, and I actually like that because
I'm ultimately, it's good. I hope they commit to it, but I was kind of like, oh, it's usually like Bullock and Montoya together, but they did not do that this time. And again, this isn't me saying it like, I wish they just did it like the TV show. I like that they made this specific and unique. But yeah, Flass and Bullock break out. I like this little thing because you're like, oh yeah, they're using Firebug's name, but they call him Firefly, and he's like, no, I'm Firebug, and they're like, yeah, whatever, just go use Firefly shit and start some fires, and you're like, that's wild. Like, they were willing to let all those kids and those people die to trap Batman and like become famous.
Yeah, it's
nuts.
It's nuts. It's so wild. And it's just because, Rupert Thorne's like, yeah, we want to get this and all the kind of, like, everything he does, it's just so messed up. And I think it's so great to show, like, yeah, that's the level of corruption. We're in it for ourselves, but also we're following demands from Rupert Thorne, all that
the
kind
person
of
who's
stuff.
actually in control here.
Yeah, and I'm like, this is great. This is such a great episode.
Yeah, it's great. And it's because there's so many times where, like, I think both times I watched this episode, I gasped when like Batman does show up to help the people because it's a fire and he's not going to just sit there at this point. And the cops just open fire on him, meaning they could have hit the mother and children.
Yes.
And I'm like, what the like, I wasn't like, oh, like, how could this happen? I was just like, yeah, this is what people's issue with cops are, though. In real life, this would also be an issue. That you would just open fire because you're so trigger happy and not think about the people you're supposed to be there to protect.
Right.
And I like that later on, even Jim Gordon's like, nah, you can't take the kids outside because they're going to shoot at you and they probably won't see the kids. And it's like, well, even then. So, okay, great. But you also get to see Batman be like, I'm going to fuck you guys up. I'm not going to just incapacitate you. I'm going to beat you up. And I was like, good. Keep going, Batman.
It's very effective. It's very effective. I like it a lot.
But he has to work with Jim on this. And as I said, I'm not saying they'll never become what they are in the comics and the most media representation we see, but I like that it was just like, I'm not going to get in your way. They're not like, oh, let's be best buddies. He doesn't do his normal, like, show up to Jim. He does it to Barbara every time. Barbara's the one that goes, oh my God, don't you ever knock? So I like that it was just like, I know you're not one of the bad cops. And I know it has to change, but I like that in this season, Batman wasn't on the hunt for good cops. He was just like, nah, you guys are bad. This is I don't trust you at all. There's just some of you I recognize aren't as bad as others, and I'll talk with you, but like I'm not looking to work with you guys.
Yeah. Plus, it makes much, much more sense
Mm-hmm.
that it's just like I would trust the DA over someone that's still carrying a badge and all this kind of stuff. Like he needs to Jim needs to earn his trust in this, right? And
Yeah,
he's
it's not the
doing
other way
that.
around.
Yeah, exactly. And he's doing that very, very well. There's certain times in this series where I'm like, wait, what? Is he really just standing there looking over like what they got over him? Like that's kind of like crazy. Like
Mm-hmm.
is he and when they run out and they kind of have that spotlight, I'm like, oh, is this where he's gonna be like, this is where you know, I'm gonna leave you a gift. This is the bat signal. They don't do that. And I'm just
No,
like,
because he doesn't want to work with
interesting.
them.
Yeah.
In
It's
this
really
season.
interesting.
I'm aware that it will most likely change. But
Yeah.
this season I appreciated that it was like, no, I don't want to work with you. You're just here.
Yeah.
This reminds me because there's this photographer here who I was like the first time I watched I was like, is he on Flass and Bullockside, which he is, but I was just like, I don't really get some of the way they I can't say acted out because it's a cartoon, so they give him these looks where I'm like, does he know that he's taking pictures that make them look bad, but ultimately they make them look good?
Mhm.
And it's this reporter, but also Lois Lane and Jimmy Olsen are in this show as well. Like they show up a bunch of times. I think
Really?
Lois Lane speaks, but Jimmy never speaks, but he's always there right beside her. And I'm
Huh.
like, that's cool. Like basically anytime there's a press conference or like a photo op, it's like Lois Lane's right there with Jimmy Olsen, which is fun. But yeah, this is just another like more developed character because
Mhm.
obviously they're from Metropolis. This is a Gotham guy, and I was like, I don't get this guy because like he's taking these pictures that should be incriminating the cops because basically what happens at the end of this is they get the fire, they get Batman out, so then Flass and Bullock are like, well, but he's got to kill Firebug because he'll just tell what we did.
Yep.
And I couldn't believe they followed through on it. They literally shot him and pushed him out the window.
Yep.
And you watch him fall to the ground and die. And I'm like, wow, okay.
I
But
was genuinely surprised that they did that. I'm
yeah,
like,
like
oh, this is definitely multi-layered. It's not just a cartoon anymore. Like they're doing all these things with this episode was one of my favorites because, like you said, they're shooting him while he's got kids and like
mhm,
the mom and all that. They're doing all these messed up things, and I'm like, this is a great episode. It's one of the
yeah.
best ones available out there, and the fact that they're layering in like Firefly in this way or Firebug in this way, that I'm like, this is awesome. It's just so good to be like, yep, this is the level of corruption that Gotham actually is.
Um, but yeah, the photographer gets a picture of Bullock standing in the window after he shoots
Mhm.
Firebug, and I'm like, what? Like that should be like, hey, why did you shoot him and not arrest him? But everyone's like, he's a hero, and you're like, okay, I guess so.
Yeah,
Um, which means that Montoya gets taken off of being the lead of the task force, and it
yeah, which is
becomes a
bullshit.
Flash
Like,
and Bullock.
yeah, like after a week, it was like, oh yeah, we're gonna do this instead.
As I
I'm like,
said,
oh yikes.
it's their fault for working with the as a police
Sure.
officer. Like, I think this show does a really good job of being like, yeah, this is why you can't use the argument of no, there's some good cops. It's like
Yeah, no,
this
it's a
is what would
system.
happen to them. They would be ultimately erased. They
Yes.
would either quit or even worse, they would be like, we're not going to come give you backup when you need it, and they
Yep.
might get killed or something.
Hmm. You're gonna put them in situations where it's like, no, we're gonna increase the chance that you're gonna, like you said, get killed or just
Yeah.
fail at your job. We're not gonna follow through with your orders. It's this boys club kind of bullshit thing that they're doing, and I
Yeah.
think it's very effective. I think it's
Yeah.
very
I like it.
effective. Mhm.
The stress of her regard. This is Dr. Quinzel turning into Harley Quinn.
Yeah, yeah,
As in,
yeah.
it's not the episode where she turns into it. It's the first time we see her as
Mhm.
Harley Quinn. And
Mhm.
as you already mentioned, she's got the great hook of, I take billionaires who are, well, there aren't any billionaires who aren't greedy with their money.
That's
I
right.
take billionaires and I torture them, which is why she's not a good guy in that sense. It's like,
Mhm.
well, that's not how you do it. But it is satisfying to watch her be like, oh, you're not working hard enough if your hands aren't bleeding. Isn't that what you told your kid? And it's like, get him,
Nice.
Harley. And
Yeah. Yeah, I
or
like
when
that.
he's like, there is no bad bulb, or is there? And she's like, I don't know. You tell me. If you find it, you're gonna. Yeah, you basically see that she has these I'm assuming that's what she was going to do to Bruce Wayne as well. I'm only coming to that realization now. I thought like, oh, she really wants to work with him, but she would have been like, no, you're a billionaire. I'm gonna fuck you up.
Yep.
But yeah, the any one of her patients, and obviously she has a particular kind of patient. She infantilize. Well, not even. I mean, most for them, she's infantilizing them and torturing them. And the episode begins with King Tut, who I now have confirmation was made for the TV show. I thought, oh, is that a comic book? But it was made for the '60s show. Yeah, so King Tut, and that's what puts everyone on the scent of like, hey, is Dr. Quinzel like fucking with her patients? And again, the reason I think Barbara is more the main character is you were immediately pulled into like, how does this make Barbara feel? What is she going to do about this? And it becomes more a story about that. And they hook Renee into it, which I loved when like Harleen clearly is just like, I like you, Montoya. Like, we should go on a date.
Yeah.
And I was excited for them, but I was like, it can't last. But like, I was like, yeah, man, like go on a date. Like, this is nice.
Especially with the backdrop of like what the 60s that they're doing
40s.
This in, or the 40s. Yeah. I'm just like, oh man, this is so multi-layered. It's so great right now.
I don't think it's the 40s. I think that's just the aesthetic they go for. I think
it's very
too many
effective.
Black people in positions where I'm like that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that.
I think
it's
the
not
look they're going for a certain look, of course.
They're going for the look. It's the storytelling, and I think the vibe suits it very, very well. But you're right. It's Jim Gordon being the commissioner. I'm like, come on, like
even the fact that there would be a Dr. Harleen Quinzel. Like, it seems like she's younger.
Yeah,
she's a woman. She's Asian. Like it. I don't think that. I'm not saying this is an error in the show. I feel like even Batman the Animated Series was trying to do the same thing of like, it is and it isn't. It doesn't matter what time period this is. We're going for a look.
It's the vibe, but let's just say it's a different multiverse version of what we experienced as the 40s, because like in the 40s they would have been talking about wars and the World War II and all that kind of stuff too. It's just like, no, there's no evidence of that here. They're just kind of going for the vibe of that era, which I think works really, really well for Batman. If in that kind of situation, all these kind of things, it's the vibe. It's so effective. I like it.
But yeah, I really like this episode. So yeah, I don't think Renee is looking into it so much as being like, oh, should I date this person? And I like their date where she's like, oh, you must have been really good at the spinny things. Like, that's exactly what they're called. Wow, like, can't believe you knew that. And Quinzel has like one moment of being like, wait, is she fucking with me? I like that. But yeah, it's Barbara, and she even goes to her dad like, hey, what do you do when the clues are leading one place and you don't want it? And he's like, the truth is better than whatever the fuck you think you're doing right now. So just follow that. Batman gets there and he tries to fight off her patients, but gets locked in one of their cells. And Harley Quinn would have got away with it. She would have. Like, 5 minutes, this place is going to blow. I knocked you out with the gas.
Yeah.
I'm out of here. But then she sees Barbara's car and it's like, I got to go back.
Yeah.
And
it all fell apart.
I feel like that means the friendship is real and that she does like Montoya for real.
Yeah. I think she's very genuine in those aspects. She's not using anyone to climb the ladder, so to speak, or get connections. It's just like, oh crap, my plan is falling apart because this person I really care about is going to be a part of the collateral blowback of this. So I gotta make things right. And I really like that aspect of like, that's how competent and good she actually is. And that's why her plan would have worked. Except
she didn't expect her friend to catch on.
There was an emotional thing, for sure. And it was very effective.
I also like that they both fall down, and Batman clearly makes a choice. I'm saving Barbara. Like, I'm not even attempting to do anything. Like, fuck you, Harley Quinn.
Yeah.
I'm glad she made it out alive. But the sad thing, obviously, for me, I don't know if that's obvious, but for me, the sad thing was when she was like on the date And she's like, "Oh, you said we're gonna have a second date. It means I'm doing well." But then she gets called because her butler is like, "Hey, Batman's here." Um, I was so upset when she's like, "Oh, just meet me at Hooper's," and I was like, "No, you're not gonna be able to meet her."
Yeah.
And then she falls to her death, and you're like, "Oh wow, that's gonna suck for Montoya because she's gonna feel stood up." I'm so glad they had the moment where she got the call,
Yeah.
and it was
Yeah.
just like, okay, you didn't get. I mean,
You
you
didn't
don't
get
know
ghosted.
anything,
Yeah.
but you know she's alive, and that you get some form of closure when she says, "I'll look you up when I get back, but I'm leaving town." And
Yep.
it isn't the plea for like, "Hey, wait for me or come with me." It's like, live your life. I'll figure out where you're at when I get back.
Yeah, it's not you, it's me kind of deal. Done very, very effectively. No ghosting. Very awesome. I like that because it shows at the end of the day, she's like, she cares about other people. She
Mm-hmm.
really, really does. And she's just like, hey, I'm tired of these billionaire assholes just thinking they can do whatever they
Mm-hmm.
want. And just I like that aspect of it. It like, like, again, it's the fact that they put a vigilante angle on what she's doing, but she's still a very human character. She wants these things. I'm like, this is it's such a complex character to me. It's
Yeah.
so great. I don't understand how people are shitting all over it because like, oh, it's woke now because she's Asian. I'm like, and again, this is where like off camera, I'm like, this doesn't make sense to me because the people that like Harley Quinn, it feels like they would also
Mm-hmm.
fetishize Asian women, which is like,
Yeah, but she's not petite in that way. That
yes, I get it. She's got hips.
visually,
She's got,
it's
yeah,
there's nothing about it that is trying to sexualize her,
I know, which is
and
like,
so
okay, great. She's a real
you're taking
woman.
that away from
I get
the
it.
people that want to at least have that aspect.
Yeah, I
But
know. It's
that's
it's
why
just so weird. So weird and
I was
inconsistent with those
ignoring the
people.
people that are into it in bad faith. I was just saying, like, how could there be anyone who's like,
Yeah.
this just
Of
feels like
course.
such a great version of the character,
It's a great take
and
on
she
the
gets to do it
character.
on her own.
Yeah. Yeah, and I love that too. I'm just like, well, yeah, we're these are definitely different iterations of these characters. You might as well just write a good character at this point and do away with a lot of those like, oh yeah, she was a sidekick for Joker and broke up with him and went off on his own. I'm like,
Yeah.
I like this way, way better. Way, way better.
Next episode is Night Ride, which I don't know him personally, but I've followed Mark Bernardin for quite some time. So I was like, oh great, you got to write a Batman episode. It is important that he's black, as this is very clearly engaging with racism very
Yep.
directly.
Mhm.
This is the Gentleman Ghost episode, and I like that
Mhm.
they're like, no, he's from the olden times, so he is actively like, what the fuck are you doing selling this house to a black man?
Mhm.
This is not okay. I'm coming back to haunt your ass. Like, I was doing my whole I rob people thing, but this I will
Nope.
not stand for this.
That's yeah.
But I think what I liked more about it was it was also interrogating, not heavily, but the idea of like black excellence and black capitalism,
Yep.
because Lucius Fox, who's been in the episodes up until this point, his big plan was, I'm gonna buy this and like make affordable home. And it's like, well, that's the issue, isn't like the needing new housing. It's like just letting people access the housing.
Right.
But yeah, like I think his thing was like, I've got money, so I'm immune to any of this. And this racist ghost reminded him, no, you're not.
No, you're not.
I still
No, you're
see you like this.
yeah. It's just the idea of, well, I'm not black, I'm OJ. And I'm
Yeah,
like, nope, nope, nope. That's not how it works. It's how
and
other people see you. You don't have the luxury of doing this just
yeah,
because you have the money thing.
and I like that this isn't the racism part, but the
Mhm.
cop at the beginning of the episode is like, well, if we had a government worth a damn, we would be recovering from this, not just letting things deteriorate.
Yep.
And it's like, yeah, like there is enough social commentary that makes the show really worthwhile watching.
Yep.
But yeah, this is the episode I'm sure you're thinking about where it's like, hey, are they doing supernatural or not? And
Yep.
Batman is like, no, it's not. Obviously, I was on Batman's side when he's like, oh, I know who you're pretending to be, but then it was like, I think he's just a ghost, man. Like, I think you're fucked.
Yeah. It was just I definitely had to watch this episode twice. I'm like, I love the social commentary, but I'm like, Yeah, are they doing real life or are they doing
No,
some?
he's a
And
ghost.
at the end of it, I'm like, oh, it's straight up a ghost that can be
Yeah,
captured by a little vial. I'm like,
yeah, because
it's an interesting curveball to
I
throw in
think
there.
the guy that he's talking to, I can't remember his name.
Mhm.
Is it Midnight or something? Doctor. That
Sure.
I don't know, but he goes to see someone, another
Mhm.
black person, and that's like a John Constantine character.
Mhm.
So
Hmm.
he helps out by being like, "This is Midnight, Midnight."
Mhm.
He's like, "Yeah, this is how you capture him, and it requires Alfred spilling his blood." I was wondering why that wasn't Batman spilling his blood, but
Mhm.
whatever. Uh, and they like do this incantation, and they think they've sucked up the ghost, but he goes into Alfred, and he says something where I'm like, in a show more focused on Batman, this would have a better payoff. But he says he's hiding something from me, and I'm assuming it's something he actually wants to hide from you. And I'm like, you could see this as just now he's just hiding who Batman really is, but it would be interesting if he was hiding something from
Mhm.
Bruce and that he wanted to hide. But I don't think the show really wanted to pick up on any of those threads. But it was interesting in the moment to be like, oh, Alfred's got a secret.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah.
Anyway, they get him, and everything's fine. And this is also the episode where Lucius Fox tries to tell Bruce to be better with Alfred. He's like, you can't treat people like this.
Yeah.
Because I think
I'm
he
s-
calls him Alfred. He's like, oh, why are you calling him Alfred? I'm like, fuck you, Batman.
yeah, it's just like, what are you doing? Don't like, oh god damn, he's the only one that cares and truly loves you. Like,
Yeah.
what are you doing here? This is it's so and I get it. It just every version of Batman is the one that doesn't want him to like it, yeah, even Harley Quinzel says it. It's like, yeah, have all these barriers, not letting people in, all that kind of stuff. And that's clearly his way of keeping Alfred at bay to be like, hey, don't get too close, man. I'm gonna call you Pennyworth and make sure you refer to as the help and all that kind of stuff. But even Lucius being like, what are you doing about this? I'm like, good.
Yeah.
Call him out on this bullshit. This is
Yeah.
nonsense. I hate the fact that he
Um,
treats him like shit the entire series.
yeah, I hate it.
Hate it.
It's not enough that he calls him Alfred at the end. I'm like, no, you should have been calling him Alfred the whole time.
I mean, like, let's hope season two fixes that,
Yeah.
and like,
Well,
he
I
doesn't
understand it's an
do the
arc for
Pennyworth.
him. I'm not.
Yeah,
I don't think it's like it's not fun for me to sit through. But I understand they thought like, oh, this will show growth.
and it
Yeah,
does, and it's
yeah.
good. But I'm just like, oh man, I gotta
But it's
sit
like
through this. This sucks.
one moment out of the 10 episodes. Um,
Yeah, yeah. Well, I
uh,
mean, at least in this episode, it's clear. It's like, why did you do that? It's like, oh yeah, you're showing you care, but you're still gonna put that wall back up afterwards and call him Pennyworth. I'm like, what the hell, man?
mhm.
That
Well, he says I can't
sucks.
do this without you or whatever.
Yeah, yeah. He
And he
full on
says like
admits it. It's
kill
vulnerable.
me so I don't have to do this to you. And he's like, I'm not gonna kill you. Which
Yeah.
again, another thing I like about Batman, which is the I'm not
Mhm.
gonna give up on you.
Mhm.
Uh,
Yes.
okay, next one is Moving Target, which is interesting because Mark Bernardin I know is his own person, but I heavily associate him with Kevin Smith because they do podcasts together. They always are working
Yeah.
together. Onomatopoeia, who is the main bad guy, if you want to say that, in this is a creation of Kevin Smith. Kevin Smith created that character.
Right.
So it's interesting that Mark Bernardin's on a show with a Kevin Smith created character. But it's funny because if you look up onomatopoeia, right under it is a quote about how Kevin Smith's like, it wouldn't work in like real life though. It works when you're reading the comic because you're used to the like people saying things like that, but it wouldn't work. And I was like, yeah, it he looks cool in this, but I was like, he's just not ever gonna speak in sentences. Like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
But I still think he's like, I'm like, that's a cool intro. I like that it's like he fits in this 40s aesthetic, even though he wasn't created during that time or even for that time, but he fits right in. I thought it was a good adaptation because they weren't trying to make him the big bad. Obviously, they were dealing with what's his face. Who's the is his last name Corrigan or something? I can't remember his last name, but yeah, Jim Corrigan, who becomes the Spectre. He's the actual bad guy in this. Spoiler alert.
Yeah.
But basically, people think a hit is being put out on Commissioner Gordon. We find out it's actually Barbara.
Yeah.
But this is the episode where they also were like, Jim and Barbara have that conversation about you can't just be like, oh, he deserves to go to jail because he did this. Like, people can make mistakes, but also you're ignoring so many different factors that lead up to that.
Yeah.
I like that it was like a younger generation, specifically the fact that they're black, of being like, you can't just like go by the rules like that. Like, just because the rules say that, you need to take in the whole context and like uncolonize your mind from like feeling like, oh no, this is the way it has to be. I appreciated that, although I don't know if they're gonna stick to that.
I hope they do, because I like that exchange, that very small, subtle exchange where Jim's like, "Oh, is this assassin another victim of circumstance?" And then and then Barbara just shoots him that look. I'm like, this is great dialogue.
See,
This
that's
is
why
really,
I didn't
really
like it, because
good.
it was like, oh, like by her not saying anything, you're just leaving it to people for people to be like, see, like Jim is ultimately right. She's too
Yeah, he got the
naive,
point. Yeah,
and that's mostly where they end the episode, which is Jim was right to think the way he was. I'm
right,
not saying that Barbara changes her mind, but they don't give her enough pushback
right.
and fortitude for me to feel like they properly landed. So I didn't actually like that exchange.
Well, I
It felt like, are the writers backing off of their good idea right now?
It's conflicting, because like later on, there's another episode where we're with Harvey Dent and all that kind of stuff, where I'm like, yeah, there's so much nuance here that gets paid off, where like Jim's thing doesn't work anymore, and I'm like, there's always nuance within these discussions. There are things where I'm like, yeah, it's cut and dry, and then there's things where I'm like, no, it is a victim of circumstance and all that kind of
Yeah,
stuff.
well,
But
but I think Barbara was always saying there's nuance. Like, you can't
yes,
just be like, oh, he made, because her thing was like, oh, only cops can make mistakes. That's the only time you're allowed to have nuance. But she's saying
right,
there should always be the nuance. And the
right.
show kind of backed off of that and was like, well, I know some people are just bad guys. And you're like,
So
well,
I
okay.
I think it's important to layer and I think this is why it's she had to back off, was the idea of like, okay, am I gonna fight this right now, or do I care dad and the assassination attempt on his life, right? The idea of like, if it wasn't his dad, I think there would have been a bit more pushback. I mean, it wasn't her dad, there'd be a little bit more pushback in that discussion.
Well,
But
I
at the
think
end
what
of
I
the
mean is,
day,
if you just watch this up until this episode,
mhm,
he gets that last barb in, she never fights it,
yes,
and then you end the episode with it being like, hey, that person you were sticking up for was trying to kill you.
right,
So you don't actually get a proper balanced dialogue there.
right. If it was just this episode, right? But
Yeah. So
clearly
that's why I'm saying I
there's
don't like that
payoff later on.
exchange,
Yeah,
because it is a 1-2 punch of he gets the last word, and then
right.
ultimately she's got to sit there being like, oh, maybe I am too naive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, basically, yeah, there's a bunch of red herrings because they think, oh, someone's trying to kill Jim Gordon, and I like that Montoya and Barbara Gordon are having this thing of like, he's being selfish because he's trying to like be the man instead of taking the help he needs. And I like, at one
Mm-hmm.
point he's like, I'll just hide out here, and they're like, so you're just gonna bring it into this neighborhood where people can get shot up? And he's like,
I
oh,
love that.
yeah, all right.
Yeah, it's like, oh god damn it. And what was it, Barbara says like Mrs. Whatever, like personalizing it for him to be
Hmm.
like, hey, like, and it's just like, okay, yeah, he does need to help and all that kind of stuff. It's really, really good dialogue between the both of them. I
Yeah,
it,
I
it,
liked it.
yeah.
um But yeah, it turns out Jim Corrigan was always going to be the guy that, like, because at first I was like, oh, good, he's helping Barbara. But they give Barbara a lot of moments where she could just fight off her attackers on her own. She's not a
Hmm.
damsel in distress at all. And I'm
Which I
not even
love.
saying, oh, so it builds up that she could be Batwoman. It was just like nice to see that she was like, I'm strapped, obviously, and
Yeah.
I can beat people up too. Like,
Yeah.
I would need to have these skills in the business I'm in.
Yeah, and
In this
it's like
city.
we know it's Gotham,
Yeah.
like all this kind of stuff. I'm like, it tracks. All of it tracks.
But yeah, that yeah, the only thing I was like, this is definitely not a Batman show, because he
Hmm.
basically stops Jim Gordon from getting, or thinking he's gonna get killed, and then be like, oh, you're not the target, and then he's like, so let's just see how this goes, instead of being like, I don't need to tell Jim he's not the target, I should just go help Barbara. They're like, no, this is gonna be a Barbara and Jim thing.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, just another time where I was like, so they don't this is not a Batman show. It's a good show, just not really a Batman show yet.
It's not hyper focused on Batman.
Nocturne. Obviously, I like this one. We got all four Robins in this one. Not all four.
Yep.
We got some four classic Robins, and they even it out to two boys, two girls. And character I don't really know. Natalia Knight and Anton Knight, which is interesting because Anton Knight is voiced by Haley Joel Osment, and I'm just like, that's good. I like that he gets to be a part of this. But yeah, another just supernatural thing where Natalia Knight is just like, oh, I just suck the life force out of people. That's my thing. Because they're like, oh, she was born with an affliction that I helped her with. I'm like, a what? It's a little too much talking around that. I don't actually know what her deal is.
Yeah. It was weird because they're like, how do we keep this supernatural but scientific at the same time? And I'm like, oh, you
I don't think they were trying to keep it scientific. He was trying to keep it scientific so no one asked questions. I don't think the show
that's kind of what I mean. It was like it's the pseudoscience of it, and I'm just like, you just need less dialogue about this and just let the Natalia Knight thing happen.
But yeah, so first she gets Dick Grayson when him and Jason Todd sneak out of the orphanage. And I was like, oh, Leslie Tompkins. I remember her from the show as well, like the animated show. This is great. Like, let's use these characters I like.
The fact that they got Leslie in there, so good. So good.
They get caught. This is another episode that Lois Lane is in. She's the one taking pictures of Bruce when he's with Julie Madison. Or not taking pictures, talking to him. But yeah, basically Bruce is there to be on a date, I guess, and Harvey Dent is there to get traction because throughout these episodes he's been courted by Rupert Thorne to be his new guy and the new mayor.
Yep.
And you're kind of just like, right, so you get that you're going to be corrupt then. But he's kind of, by the end of this episode, like, no, I don't do things like that. I'm like, what? What did you think was going to happen this whole time?
What are you talking about? Yeah.
Are you an idiot? But yeah, so basically this is where things come to a head for Harvey, and not just what happens at the end of the episode. He's really coming to terms with like, I just don't want to be this guy. I want to help people. Because you can see early on, he's like, just take the picture with the kids, get them out of here. And when Leslie's like, hey, I'm missing kids, he's like, you'll find them, get out of my face. He is like, what am I doing? Like, there's no point in me being mayor if I'm going to act like this. So he is like, hey, I'm back now. I want to help. This is after he's had his talk with Rupert Thorne about like, I'm not going to help. I'm not going to be like you. And I'm like, you don't expect you're just going to die now? Like, I don't.
Yeah, it's like
you should just be like, I gotta leave Gotham. I can't be here anymore.
Yeah, you can't pull out halfway here. You're acting really silly here. It's
like
surprising
he's invested
to me.
Time and money into you. Like you can't just be like, nope, not doing what you want.
Yeah, the first payoff you got, you gotta follow through with it at that point.
Or just be like, yeah, I'm not doing it, and then deal with it that way. But anyway, while this is happening, she's picking off the Robins one by one. Steffi, Jason, they all get caught, and it just comes down to Carrie to save the day. That's got to be her name, right?
That is Carrie.
Yeah, it is Carrie. She with her slingshot from the comics as well.
Yeah, I really like that. I thought that was really, really well done.
Yeah, I thought that was great.
Yeah.
So there's a showdown in the woods because Bruce Wayne overhears and he's like, obviously I'm gonna help, and he finds Natalia while she's trying to. There's no good way of saying this. Suck the life out of Carrie.
Yeah. Take the life force, I guess you could say.
That's the better way to say it. He stops her, and I love this move in every Batman thing, and it works because she's a girl and she's a little kid. Where she's like, "Mister, why did you hit me like that?" And I like it every time where someone tries to call out Batman for being aggressive, and he's like, "No, I didn't." And
then,
like, you're an idiot. I got you.
We're gonna freaking.
I'll like it every time. I don't care how cliche it is. I was like, Good. I'm glad
Yeah.
that you made him feel something for a second, because this show is also not interested in him feeling anything.
Yeah, it's a fun thing. I really like it. I'm like, I know what's gonna happen here.
Yeah.
You're gonna fall for it, and I'm gonna have a good chuckle. It is
Because he didn't even
great.
really do it with Catwoman. He kind of was like, "Hey, fuck you, you're a thief." But
Yeah,
he was like, "A kid, maybe I am going a bit too far."
yeah, I'm being too aggro on this, and I'm like, no, you're dealing with the supernatural right now.
Yeah,
I'm like,
because she
it
didn't then just starts having like claw abilities, and I'm like, "What is happening here?"
because he did see earlier on in the episodes, like you lifted that weight, right?
Yeah,
Like it's just, you're not dealing with just, you're dealing with a kid with superpowers
I
here.
was like,
Like
"Does he think that that machine actually gave her powers? Does he not understand how a grift works?" Like,
that's why I like
he's like,
this
"Well, she's not with
Batman.
the machine. I can get her now."
Yeah, I do like this Batman in the sense where it's like, yeah, you're gonna make mistakes and you're gonna learn from them, and this
Yeah,
is just one of those things. Like if he was like the super Batman that we know, where it's like, oh yeah,
yeah, it
you're
doesn't make
like
sense for him to
seasoned.
be.
That to have him get caught off guard by that doesn't make sense. He would have been like it, none of that works. It's the humanity of Batman in this is actually really, really one of my favorite things. And it's just like
Oh,
the
this
idea that he
is
makes mistakes, he's defensive, he's all that kind of stuff, and that he's actually playing Bruce Wayne like a fuckboy. It's so
Well,
good.
yeah, you see that
It's
in the first episode where he gets off the boat and makes
mm,
the stupid face so that everyone can see him. Also, we have to go back the humanity thing. I think you're
mhm,
right. Go back to the Harleen Quinzel episode where she
mhm,
becomes Harley Quinn.
mhm.
When everyone thinks she's dead and he's talking to Barbara and he starts off on his stupid like, "Oh, your friendship like ruined," and she's like, "Just shut up, shut up. Why would you
Yeah.
say this now?" I was like, "Yes, yes,
Mhm.
stop this right now. Let this woman grieve. Her
Yeah,
friend just
don't
died, or she thinks her friend just died."
yeah, don't freaking
And I
lecture
like that
her.
he's like,
She needs a
note
hug.
taken. That's a very good note. All right, I gotta go. She's
Yeah.
like, yes, please.
Yeah, get out of here if you're not gonna. Yeah, I like that a lot. It's just like, don't lecture people when they're going through shit. That's not the
Yeah,
point.
she's
They
not your
already
Robin.
are
Like
knowing
she's
what they
her own
need.
person.
Yeah,
She's not working for you.
yeah,
But yeah, back to
not-
this episode
yeah.
when they subdue. Basically, we didn't say this, but Natalia can't be out in the daytime. She can only be out at nighttime, and so she's starting to see the effects as sunrise happens, and Batman's trying to help her. And I love that Carrie's like, "Oh no, you could definitely let her die. She's a monster. Just let her die."
Yeah, it's really good.
And Batman's like, "Obviously not. That's
Yeah,
not
we're not
happening."
gonna do
But
that.
I like that he is like, I'm not a cop in that way. I'm not
Mhm,
here to punish these people. I want to save the day. I don't
mhm,
want to punish these people. So no, we're gonna get her help. Um, and that's reinforced when they go to the hospital,
mhm.
and he's like, "So good. The orphans are okay. What about Natalia?" Like he's asking about all of them because he genuinely cares.
Yes.
But yeah, this is also the episode where we see the court case where Harvey does decide, I'm not doing what Thorne told me to do,
Yeah,
and he
which
gets
is
the.
like
I was like, oh
basically
shit, they're
throw
doing
out
it
that
right now.
case.
I
Yeah.
was so like, oh look, they'll do that later, but it's like, oh no, it's happening right now. Okay, like let's do
It's
this.
it's it's a great moment to be like, okay, they're finally doing the Two-Face thing, but also the idea of like, okay, this is really, really, it was great for me because I was like, and I was telling you this over text. I was like, yeah, I'm only taking watching one or two episodes at a
Hmm.
time to really like let everything sink in. When that happened, I'm like, oh no, 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 we're breaking that rule.
Yeah,
We're
we got to
watching
watch the next
four, we're
one.
watching the rest of the season right now. And it was so good. It was so good just because I'm like, yeah, the acid thing makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah.
Disfigure him, ruin the race, and all that kind of stuff, mess up his psychology. It's so well done
Hmm.
in that sense. I really liked it.
Um. So yeah, the next episode is the killer inside me,
Mhm.
and it starts with Harvey dreaming, I guess, about winning the election, but then he wakes up and he's got the mask on. I was really like, "Well, you got to show this face. I need to see what this guy did.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
can't
yeah.
take it that they're hiding him." But they do a good job of really teasing it.
Mhm.
And as you said, his psyche is completely ruined because now he's like, "Oh no, they're all looking at me."
Mhm.
In his dream, even though you can't see the face, and probably he did have a full face in the dream, he's still hearing people saying, "Oh, what a monster! Oh my god!" Oh, and you're like, "Yeah, his life is ruined now."
I really like how they played out that dream sequence. I
Mm-hmm.
really liked it because they were very careful with the shots and like the angles and all that kind of stuff to be like, are they? Did he actually get elected and did he not? And he wakes up and all that kind of, I'm like, this is really well done. It's really, really well done. But
Um,
yeah.
so yeah, he does that, and then
And I really like the fact that Bruce pushes him over the edge here. It's like, hey, and that later on he gets called out for it is the idea of like, hey, we're not all like you. We can't just pretend that everything's okay and just keep
yeah,
going on our lives as
he
normal. I'm like,
forces Harvey to go out,
in
and
public with the
obviously
bandages.
Harvey's not having
It's
a
a
good
bad
time.
idea. Yeah, it's a
Like
bad idea.
even before he starts getting like what's the word for it? Like anxious and thinking that people are talking about him before paranoid.
Paranoid.
Even
Yeah,
before
paranoid.
he gets paranoid, you're like, he's not laughing at your jokes either. Like he doesn't want to be here. And
Yeah.
then he keeps letting things slip, like, "I'm gonna cut that guy's throat." And Bruce is like, "Whoa," and he's like, "Oh, sorry." And I like that Bruce is kind of like, "That's fine. Don't
Yeah.
worry about it." And then but yeah, ultimately it ends up with him like almost strangling a waitress and being like, "Oh, look at me, look at me. You like this?" And you see the damage that it's done to him.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember when it is, but there's one point where uh, I think it's after this. He's like recuperating, and Bruce goes to see him again to be like, "Hey, sorry, I took you." And he's like, "Oh, whatever. Like, what are you gonna do about it? That's how you deal with things, right? You're the great pretender." And Bruce is like, you can see that like bubbling up again. Where Bruce is like, "Hey, what the fuck does that mean?" Or when he
Mm-hmm.
actively goes like, like, "Don't give up now, Harvey or Dent," and you're like, "Oh, like there's some animosity here."
Yeah.
I wish it was a show that would go deeper into it, but here it is, I guess, for this moment in time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's yeah, it does pull back at the wrong moments where I'm like, oh, I do wish they would flesh this out a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
but they're clearly having to be like, hey, we got to stick to the fact that this is a 20 odd minute runtime or whatever, and this is the point of the show is we got to establish this aspect of it. I am genuinely surprised that at the end of the episode, Harvey's actually dead. You know
Not
what I
this
mean?
episode.
Not this one, but like towards the next one and all that kind of, I'm like, I'm genuinely surprised that they made that decision. I'm like, what the hey, okay, well, I
But
guess
I
that's
guess
what's happening. But
that's the Dark Knight influence of like, there's only one story to tell with this guy, and we told it. Goodbye.
right, right,
I don't
right.
agree with that, but I think that's
I
kind of the thinking.
completely, yeah, very
Um,
much. I thought like,
Also,
okay, they're gonna live on. They're gonna Batman and his love for Harvey Dent or Bruce's heart love for Harvey Dent is gonna keep making mistakes with that character. But nope, they just give you a very definite ending here.
well, we've really jumped
Yeah.
here. We
Yeah. Oh,
haven't.
that's my bad. That's my
Yeah.
bad. My
Um,
ADHD not good today.
I did
Yeah.
forget to say that the person that does the initial assassination attempt in the episode where everyone thinks that there's a hit out on uh,
Barbara. I mean
Jim,
on Jim. Yeah.
that was Deadshot that did that.
Yeah.
That's cool. I like that they layer in, and in the Nocturne episode, they got Killer Croc in there. That was a
Yeah.
great moment where he's like, "I'm looking for these two girls," and like, "What the fuck do you want with two girls? Beat this guy up. You're the freak. We're not freak." I was
Yeah.
like, this is
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
I was like, "Oh yeah, like what is he? He can't just go around masking like that."
Yeah. I do like the fact that it's like Killer Croc was just part of the sideshow aspect
Mm-hmm.
of that circus and just not actually a criminal yet. And they're probably going to
Yeah,
build off that later. But like, yeah, this is just a guy that's found peace in his own like own way and his
he does
own
the right
community.
thing, which was like, I
Yeah.
feel like you're doing something you shouldn't be doing with these girls. Maybe
Yeah.
they shouldn't find you.
Yeah. It's I really like that moment. I'm like, this is good Killer Croc stuff, and they just like dropped him in there really, really well. It's
Yeah.
great.
Okay, back to the killer inside of me. I like it feels very similar to, like, I feel like even they do similar locations, but it's very similar to Dark Knight where
Mhm.
he goes on his quest to get revenge, and I'm like, I can't really say he's going after the wrong people. Like, he is trying to
Mhm.
help people. He's just like
It's selfish too.
like
Yeah.
I would say him and Harley are like, it is mostly vigilante justice. It's just they're
Mhm.
also taking it too far.
Yes.
Um, but I was kind of like, hey man, like these people need to be dealt with, not the way you're doing it, but they do need to be dealt with.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, so yeah, I appreciated that he was on that run, but then he ultimately gets arrested, and at the end of the episode, Barbara comes to be like, "I'll be your lawyer,"
Yeah.
because they had really been playing the two of them off each other. Obviously, he's a prosecutor, she's a defense lawyer, so they all
Hmm.
would have gone back and forth. So I thought it was a nice payoff that she's like, "I'll help you," because
Yeah.
throughout the episode, people keep being like, this isn't your fault, like this was done to you,
Hmm.
and we understand that nuance there, and they're trying to help, but obviously Bruce is going about it the wrong way.
Yeah, and I like the fact that yeah, the acid was thrown on you, but you did take the bribe in the beginning. It's like you invited this all in. It just it,
But that's what I'm
it's all
saying,
those elements.
this was the Barbara point that I think gets
Mhm.
lost
Yep.
because of how they structured it. The
Yep.
Barbara point is you need to take in the full context. So, what is a politician in Gotham supposed to do when that is how things are done?
Yep.
These are the types of things she's talking about. Like, he
Mhm.
made a mistake, but what is the greater issue that would force people to make mistakes like that?
Yep.
That's what I mean. Like, the show backed off of that because even you saying that shows that it wasn't clear what her point was and how that stands.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It's a shame that they don't develop that more, but
Yeah,
it's
like so. Yeah,
exciting that they bring it up. It's
they brought
exciting
it
that they
up,
do.
but
Yeah.
I didn't like that they eased off of it and even kind of went in the opposite direction.
Yeah.
It I understood her point, so I get how it is still inherent in the way things play out,
Hmm.
but she never voices it again, so the opposite is the only thing that gets reiterated.
Hmm.
And so
True.
I feel like it gets lost.
Hmm. Yeah.
But yeah, so that's the end of episode 9. Is he was in Arkham, and she's like, "I'll be your lawyer."
I do like how in Arkham he's just like walking around. It's like, hey, he just wants this, and
Mm-hmm.
or is that the
Yeah,
next
give him his
episode?
like. I don't know, but yeah, he's like, "Oh, Professor Pig just wants his pig. Why are you guys being assholes about this?"
Yeah, it's just like, wait, is that? Are we just letting people walk around? What's going on here? It was an interesting little thing that they did there. I'm like, okay, cool.
Um, I think it's this episode where instead of a bat like the Batman, because he keeps showing up, and Barbara's like, "Yeah, cool. You want to do this? Can I have your phone number so I can reach you if I need to get you?" And he
Yeah,
just gives a genuine phone number. She's
that
like,
was
"Wait, what?"
so weird. That was
I
so
mean, again,
weird.
but that's the '60s show. They use a phone number instead of a thing. So I was just like, I
Yeah.
mean, sure, go for it. And
Hmm.
she doesn't have access to the top of the police station, and I would actually rather they not make him like akin to the police by
Yeah.
using that. So I prefer this. I know it's not going to stick, but I liked it for this season that it was like, I do have a phone number. You can have it because I trust you.
Yeah. I personally think it's pretty damn funny. It's good and it works really, really well. It's like, wait, you have a phone number?
Yeah.
And like how's it what is it? Klondike, like whatever,
Yeah.
and like, the numbers. I'm
It's
like, oh,
Klondike and then the issue of Detective Comics that he first appeared in.
right. It's
Um,
pretty deep cut stuff, and it's
yeah.
like it's really, really good, actually. I'm like, yeah, because that makes way more sense than the freaking bat signal. Freaking bat signal is cool and
I mean,
iconic
it
as that
makes more
is.
sense in a world where you have cell phones, but they don't have cell phones, so it doesn't make that like it's not
Yeah,
that great.
it's not the greatest, but the idea of like, oh yeah, we're gonna throw out this bat signal and he's gonna just appear out of nowhere. I'm like, oh, it's yeah, that's
So yeah, the this episode is basically like a chase where
hmm
they're trying to get. I don't even really know where they're trying to transfer Harvey, but obviously Thorne's people are after him to kill him, and that includes Bullock and Flass.
class. Yeah.
And I love this, like the mind tricks he tries to play on them because it kind of works, which kind of makes me feel like they are gonna try and do some redemption arc for Bullock. But when he's like,
Hmm.
"Oh, it's Flass in charge," and I couldn't tell if this was racially motivated, but he's like, I mean, I always thought it was Bullock, and I I think he always knew it was Flass, but I I can't tell if he's trying to play on something there by being like, well, I
I
would have
definitely
thought it
think
was
he's
Bullock.
trying to play on the racial aspect of it,
Because
where
I
it's
could
like,
just see it being like, oh, I just want to split them up, and then saying I always thought it was Bullock because the obvious answer is Flass is in charge to everyone. But I couldn't tell if they were like also like, you let the black man tell you what to do. All right.
To me, it was very clear. To me, it was like, oh, he's definitely playing up this trope and all that kind of stuff. That it's like, you're gonna take orders from a black guy. Like, what are you doing here? You know, you're gonna do the dirty work. It's like it's always you. It's
Yeah.
and just like, oh, he really knows how to get under his skin and play this racial tension between the two of them and all that kind of stuff. I'm like, this is really, really well done. And the fact that he does play that mind game, I'm like, yeah, this would be successful at getting Bullock's insecurity because
Yeah.
you know it's really well done there. But to me, it was very, very clear. He was being like, "You're gonna take orders from a black guy, really?" And you know,
I mean, they obviously want you to know Flass is black. It's a black actor playing a black character. But like Rupert Thorne is played by a black actor, but he's clearly white. So it's like I can't tell if that was race blind casting on, or not casting, but race blind. Like, oh, Flass is just going to be black because the actor is black. He had the best read, or if they really wanted to bring that out in here because obviously he is the bad guy. So I'm like, I don't know. I don't love that it's like, especially when we get to the last scene. So I don't know how much I actually want it to be a race thing.
Right.
But yeah. Because I'm like, oh, so the worst cop is the black cop, which can be true in times, but not in this. This is not how that would play out. It would be the black cop trying to prove that he can hang with the white cops and doing terrible things to other people, not the one that's like moving and shaking and can do whatever he wants. But anyway, that's whatever. But yeah, I throughout this, they're just trying to get what's his face Dent to safety now that he keeps switching in and out of being like, you got to stop me, like the other guy's gonna take over, I'm gonna keep killing, I can't, I need to be taken care of. And there is that funny moment where Barbara first calls her dad for help and then is like, sorry, I gotta wait one more call. I genuinely didn't know who she was gonna call. I'd forgotten that she had his number and that like, you call him Batman? And she's like, can I talk to Batman?
That was so funny to me. Just like, that would be awkward.
Yeah.
Like,
especially in a world where he's not established. So it's like, I'm assuming it's Alfred who answered the phone.
Yes, it is.
Like, but it's just like, sorry, can I speak to Batman? Is there a Batman?
It's funny to me because it's not like, okay, I get why it would be like, can I speak to Batman? And it would go through Alfred and then have that old school switchboard and all that kind of stuff. That makes sense to me. But the fact that like Batman never goes like, oh yeah, by the way, I gave this number out to Barbara, so like screen the calls. If it's her, then put it through. But if it's not, like, but at the same time, Batman's a dick in this, so it kind of makes sense that he wouldn't be fully transparent about that. It's just the whole tone of like, am I actually calling Batman? I'm like, that's funny. It's so funny to me. It was very well done.
Yeah.
And we should say too, like the whole idea of why it's so important that they're protecting him, aside from the fact that he's, there's a threat out on his life, is they're trying to get him to testify and to weed out the bad corruption and all that kind of stuff. And even like Dent goes like, you think that's gonna actually take care of everything? It's like there's more people like gonna step up and take that place. And he brings out all these points. I'm like, yeah, they're still gonna try.
Yeah, you gotta try, but yeah,
you still gotta try.
Yeah. Also, you touched on it already, but I do think we should address in episode 9 where Batman goes full on asshole and is like, "You're wasting my time, Pennyworth," and I was like, I don't care if you die. Don't you ever talk to Alfred like that.
Yeah. He's the only one that loves you. Stop pushing him away.
Yeah, because I think Alfred's had enough. And he's like, you keep pushing him. Stop pushing him. Like, there is a different way to help him out. And Batman's like, nah, I'm do it my way.
Yeah. Just so shitty, but
I did not appreciate that.
No.
At all.
Don't like it.
But yeah, by the end of this,
he calls him Alfred.
Yeah. No, I was gonna say by the end of this,
Oh,
they get they stop the hit on Dent, but only because they don't stop it. They actively kill Dent, but I
Mhm.
think they were going for Barbara, and so it's Flash that shoots, right?
I believe so. Yes,
I think
Flash
it's Flash
shoots.
shoots, and Harvey Dent saves her. And I
Mhm.
remember just being like, I don't know what he's saying. Is he saying when she goes, "Why'd you do that?" Is he saying beats me or like I don't know?
Yeah, I
Interesting.
can't remember, to be perfectly honest, but it's I'm just like, oh man, you just really screwed up their whole plan and the whole reason why they went through all this trouble to transport you.
So, and as I said online, the big emotional showdown here is
Mhm.
Batman versus Flash,
Mhm.
and he's been pretty like nonchalant about everything else that's happened,
Mhm.
but obviously that gun violence gets to him in a show where we don't really know how he feels about gun violence, and he picks up the gun, and
Mhm.
I understand he doesn't spend the most time with Flash, but it is clearly this got under his skin.
Yeah.
He is affected by this. This is the big showdown
Mhm.
ultimately. All those other things were kind of like, yeah, that's just what I do normally, but this is like I'm gonna
It got
fuck you
personal
up.
for him.
Like, yeah,
Yeah.
this is personal, and so that's why I was like, I don't know if I want them to really be serious about the whole Flash is black thing because it's like, so his
Mm.
big showdown is pointing a gun at a black guy.
Mhm. Yeah, and it's one of the things too, and I think this is a really, really good point that someone else, I can't remember who made this point, but the idea of like Batman leaves his mouth open so that the police can identify that he's still a white guy underneath the mask and all that kind of stuff, so they don't shoot him. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
oh man, this is just and I think like yeah, that's really good. The fact that someone identifies that because you're right. Other than that you're just like yeah, why wouldn't you cover your whole face? It would just like
I
ruin
mean,
the whole stealth thing. But the idea
it's a
of
nice
like
thing to say, but the cops shoot at him all the time.
they do shoot him all the time, but they
So it's
it's
not
it's
really a valid point. It's just a nice thing to say.
sure. But in this, it's just like I was about to lose my shit. I'm like, is he picking up the gun right now? Is he actually aiming it? And you hear the gunshots. I'm like, am I gonna be pissed off right now? And the fact that he's like, oh, okay, he did the thing where he shot around his head.
Mm-hmm.
Still not great. I
No,
like the fact that it breaks him to be like, oh, this is how far I went, and he
he
threw the
throws the
thing
gun.
over, and then that's when he's like, okay, I need to know my limits a lot better. I need to get in control of this. I need to recalibrate. I like the fact that
You're
it
doing a
does
lot of
that,
work for the show.
but
That's
it's
nice of you.
just it's not. It's still at the end of the day. I'm like, I don't like the fact that he picked up a gun.
I
I
don't
don't
mind that he
like
did
it.
that. I'm just saying the show wasn't invested in him enough for that to mean much to me outside of what I bring to that character. There's
Right.
nothing in the writing or
Mhm.
anything that would make me feel anything about that if I didn't know who Batman was or
Yeah.
feel like I knew who Batman was.
Yeah,
And I
that
don't
it
think
is
that's great.
it's not
I
good
think it
writing.
should work that you understand what it means for him to pick up that gun if you
Yes.
had never seen anything else. But it
Yeah,
doesn't mean anything in that show that he does
I
it.
agree. I agree. They're definitely it's not the best writing in that regard. This is where when I go like, oh, I love the fact that they didn't show the parents getting killed. I'm like at that when I watched it, I'm like, it would have made more sense if we saw the parents getting killed with gun violence.
Well,
It would
because
have
they keep
meant
playing
more.
around with it, right? Like it's like,
Yeah.
oh, Alfred heard, and like, and you can tell they're afraid because oh, they're gonna get mad at us if we show them dead. And it's like,
Mhm.
but this is clearly a big deal for them. So why are we like talking around it or just showing little snippets? Like, just
It's
commit
true.
to it. Tell your
It's true.
story.
Hmm. It's true. Which is this is why I'm like divided on the thing. I'm like, cool, we didn't have to see his parents getting killed, but at the same time, you see why they kind of needed to if they're gonna do this as the huge emotional showdown point, like you said. It would have meant more if that was the thing, especially coming out of the Harley Quinn kind of situation,
Hmm.
right? That whole
It
like
works in the
interrogation,
Harley
like
Quinn episode,
yeah,
especially where that's placed in the order of episodes of like
right.
he's not going to give you anything here. She's not going to get out of him certainly.
Mm.
But if he had a better relationship with Alfred, that could be something they talk about. Or
Or at
if he
least him
says it
having
to
a
Harvey and it
nightmare.
wouldn't matter because Harvey's going to die at the end of the season. Like,
Yeah,
there's a bunch of stuff that could have been done
I agree.
that would have helped. But yeah, the that was my thing. I was just like, it just doesn't land for me the way I think they want it to, outside of me being like, I understand he's upset. But
Yes.
all that thing you said about him feeling like, oh, now I gotta work on myself, this is how far I was pushed. I'm like,
I'm
that's
definitely giving the show a
that's
lot. I'm giving the show a lot.
we
I
have
acknowledge
this
that.
idea of Batman, so all of what you said makes sense, and it
Hmm.
might be what they're implying, but it's not clear. I don't, like, it doesn't actually appear in the text that that's what's happening, or
Right.
that it mattered at all that he shot a gun at him.
I will agree with that. 100% I will agree with that because it's just us being like supplementing this show
Yeah.
with Batman lore that we know and
And
all
I
that
think
kind of
that only
stuff.
happens when it comes to the Batman stuff, because they did a
Yes.
great job with Barbara, with Harley, with Montoya.
Hmm.
I th- I I think that with Harvey Dent, like throughout the whole season, like,
Hmm.
but I think a little too much was left to your imagination with Batman.
I would agree with that. I would agree with
But I
that.
do like the last scene with Batman where Thorne is watching TV and he gets a batarang to the ear, and Batman's standing there like the Batman animated series credits. I was like,
Hmm.
good.
Nice.
We know where he's going for next season,
Yeah.
and he didn't shoot him, so I guess he is not going to use guns. Like,
Yeah.
but I was like, that's cool. And then they do the Joker thing at the end,
Hmm.
the right before credits scene.
Yeah.
Which is fine. I mean, just I understand you're not going to do Batman without Joker at some point.
Yeah. You have to have Joker, and that like it. I'm looking forward to it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it makes sense that they would tease it like that. Yeah. It's just very very at least they're showing us where it's going and all that kind
Mm-hmm.
of stuff, and that
Yeah.
this Batman has learned. It's like, yeah, I'm not just gonna put away Penguin, like, and then leave that power vacuum. It's like, no, I got to keep Thorne alive, and then I got to do this a different way than
Mm-hmm.
what he did. Like that's the whole thing, like the ear thing, and I'm like, this is really really well done from that character development part, but. I get where it's like, yeah, I don't want to watch the parents die, but it would make that gun thing for Flash way more impactful if it did. And he yeah, I'm definitely meeting the show more than halfway when it comes to that scene.
Which is
I
fine.
fully acknowledge that.
I
But
think
I'm
it was
like, I'm
created
not.
that way. It was
Yeah,
like, so they did what
the
they needed to do, but I
yeah
do
the
think that it could have stood to be a little bit more invested in Batman and Bruce Wayne.
yeah, because even if like they did it through a nightmare sequence for Bruce, I've been like, all right, that's good. He can still be the person that brings up the walls and all that kind of stuff. Doesn't talk to Harley Quinzel about it, but the fact that it's like, yeah, they don't do it. It works against the show more than anything because they're just being like, yeah, you guys know the Batman lore.
Mm-hmm.
We're just gonna not do this. And I'm like, I don't think I don't think that works as well as they think. And they get away with it because the Batman lore is so famous. But in a world where you're doing such a great show, it would have been more effective if they showed the parent thing because it is, I guess, the canon point for them to be like, yeah, he has
It's
to do
kind
that.
of the reason why he is the way he is. So you
Exactly.
might want to let us in onto how this version of him feels about it or experienced it.
Right. Right.
Well, let's rate this show. I'm gonna give it an 8.5. I think it's solid.
Mhm.
I'm looking forward to next season. What about you?
I'm giving it an 8. I would have given it an 8.5, but I think we talked me down from an 8.5 because of the whole gun thing. But yeah, I'm very much looking forward to next season. This is really really cool. It's like I said, it's like the idea of read the Batman animated series that's just grown up from a writing standpoint, and I'm like, it's really really cool, but then also at the same time it's like, yeah, there's glaring issues with this, and not from like the woke stuff. It's just like, yeah, just the Batman stuff. It needs to be more front and center here as opposed to the background side of
Mhm.
things. They do a lot to establish everything that I do like about why Batman, like the corruption of Gotham, which I really really appreciate here. And I'm really looking forward to the next season, and I hope they get to do more of these revisiting these series that we grew up with in a different kind of light. I think it's really really cool.
Awesome. Well,
Hmm.
thank you very much for listening, everybody. If you'd love to hear more episodes of our show, you can rate, review, subscribe, follow on all the podcast platforms you use. If you want to hear really old episodes, go to tdfeverything.com/spoiledrotten. And you'll find those episodes there. And please get in touch with us. Our email is spoiledpodcast@gmail.com. We are at TDFSpoiled on Instagram, Twitter, and Threads. And yeah, you got options. So get in touch with us and follow along. Bye-bye.
Cheers.
This has been a TDF Everything production, brah.